Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Sunday, July 28th, and we are back with you for the second part of our doubleheader with the wide receivers and the tight ends of the AFC South. How you doing this morning, Jay?
Ben, rearing and ready to go. I've got 10 cups of coffee in me at this point. I'm jittery. Let's do this. Steve, how are you doing?
Pretty great, guys, and I'm right there with you. I have my IV in my vein right now, just flowing caffeine directly to the bloodstream, and I'm ready to go.
Let's talk some fantasy.
All right, let's jump right into it. First up, we have got Indianapolis Colts tight end Eric Ebron. He is currently going as tight end 7 in the back end of the 6th round behind Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, and in front of Jared Cook and Vance McDonald. He's Foresight's aggregate projected tight end 8, and Total Foresight clocks him in as tight end 4 overall this season, which we'll talk about that here in a second. Yep. He does have a very nice savage strength of schedule metric, clocking in at tight end 5 overall there. Now, let's look at his career finishes real quick. He was tight end 40 his rookie year. Then after that, he's been kind of consistently a back-end tight end 1, finishing as tight end 13, tight end 14, tight end 13. And last season, he exploded with Jack Doyle going down with injury and Andrew Luck's offense as the primary pass-catching tight end. Yep. He finished as tight end 4 overall in points per game. He was healthy for all 16 games, and he was tight end 1 overall with 13 total touchdowns. I mean, the rest of his stats, 66 receptions, 750 yards, that's solid, but what jumps out at me is the 110 targets. He got a very big time influx in volume last season, and to his credit, he capitalized on it. And I know the next gen stats point that out as well.
Well, that's exactly right, Ben. And to your point, he was tight end 5 of targeted air yards. He saw 22% of his team's targeted air yards last season. And Steve, before we dive into this, I mean, he had an elite season, and I'm sure his consistency numbers spoke to that as well.
Yeah, overall, we're talking about, it's funny, he was either tight end 3 or 4 across the board in every consistency metric. So weeks in the top 6, top 12, top 24, his average weekly ranking. He was elite, right? I mean, really just behind the big 3 of Kittle, Ertz, Kelsey, because he did have an elite season. And it will be very interesting to see how he is utilized in the offense this year with Jack Doyle coming back healthy. And it is also interesting when you look at like the snap splits between Doyle and Ebron when they both are on the field. Doyle outsnaps him, and it's pretty egregiously. But the dude still finds a way to get in the end zone. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this shakes out this year for this offense, because there's a lot of mouths to feed. They added Devin Funches, and that's just going to be another big body in the red zone that could potentially, poach some of those touchdowns away from all the tight ends in Indianapolis.
And I'm sure Lions fans are frustrated by the fact that the physical abilities of Eric Ebron that they've always watched and wanted to see exceed did so finally in Indy last season, but he did so in the absence of Jack Doyle. And currently with his price tag, you're paying for the fact that you think Jack Doyle is going to be limited once again in his opportunities and that Eric Ebron is going to feast with an expanded role. And I'm just not sure that that's something you want to gamble on.
You both make great points. I mean, Jack Doyle plus Devin Funches equals it's not going to be the same season for Eric Ebron in 2019. Sometimes in fantasy football, when guys explode onto the scene, it means that, we have found something and they are here to stay. Sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle. And I think what happened with Eric Ebron is the latter. And not because he's not a good player, but because now they have an additional red zone threat in Devin Funches, and they have an additional tight end that outsnaps him when he's on the field in Jack Doyle. So no disrespect to Eric Ebron. He's going to be a very nice weapon, a nice piece in that offense, but you cannot expect the same type of upside in 2019 that you got out of him in 2018 because it was so heavily dependent on volume.
Completely agree. All right, let's take a look at Delaney Walker. He is the next drafted tight end in this division. He's going in as tight end 13. Now we're dropping tight end 7 was being selected late in the 6th round. Tight end 13 is now going late in the 12th round, and he is being selected behind Austin Hooper, TJ Hawkinson, and in front of Greg Olsen and Trey Burton. His aggregate projection this season is tight end 12. His total foresight rank is tight end 15, right around where he's being selected. Career finishes? I'm not even going to read them. The guy has been around forever. Games played last year, though, 1. That's troubling for a guy who's been around forever and who's getting later in his career, and the fact that he was injured last season. When he did play in that one game, he was tight end 13 that week, but he finished in as tight end 81 because he played in one game. So guys, Delanie Walker, end of his career, going as tight end 13 in the 12th round.
We all love Delanie Walker on this podcast, and we all hope that he returns to form this season. However, for me, in 2019, when you tell me that going around him, I could go with an Austin Hooper or a Trey Burton, especially Trey Burton cheaper than Delanie Walker. I like both Trey Burton's situation and his health outlook more than Delanie's, and his age more than Delanie in 2019. But so I think I'm staying away from Delanie this season for me because of how many seasons he's played, all the wear and tear. Even the greats, when they fall off, sometimes they fall off a cliff. And I don't know. I mean, it's super cheap, so I can certainly get the upside. But for me, I think there's even better options even later at the tight end position.
And Steve, I know you'll probably agree with this, but Delanie Walker's entering his 14th season. And to me, he's entering Antonio Gates territory now, where he can present you some value. It's just not somebody I want to rely on for a season, but he could provide some great spot duty for you. But that being said, he's not a guy then that I'm going to draft. I'm going to wait to scoop him up off the waiver wire to fill in for me when needed during the season.
Yeah, you guys both make really great points, and I think probably some of the reason we do see Delanie going ahead of somebody like a Trey Burton, maybe it's just more than anything some name recognition because he's played so long. Guy's going to be 35 when we start the NFL season. I feel like he's like the Frank Gore of tight ends or something. Yeah. And he's been, up until last year, he had 3 straight top 5 tight end finishes. So I just think that's probably what's in people's mind. But I totally agree with you, Ben. Trey Burton later, I'll take that, a guy that I think is going to be on the field and in an offense that I think will be superior to the Tennessee Titans offense. So do that all day long.
All right. Now, we already discussed this other gentleman a little bit, but let's dive in. Jack Doyle is the final tight end being selected in this division. He is going as tight end 17 behind Trey Burton and Jimmy Graham and in front of Jordan Reed, somebody Ben loves, and Mark Andrews. Doyle's 2019 aggregate projection is tight end 19, and his total foresight rank is tight end 16. Now, we have spoken to the fact that he only played in 6 games last season, but he is back, albeit limited to start camp. And we spoke to the situation between he and Ebron where he outsnaps Ebron when they are both healthy. So, that being said, health is a factor, and that is factored into his cold hard truth total foresight rank as tight end 16. Now, he does present some definite value in that offense if he can stay healthy, and at a tight end 17 price point in drafts, that is screaming tremendous value to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if he can stay on the field, Jack Doyle, if you go back and listen to our 2018 preview cast, we love Jack Doyle on this podcast. And, Steve made a great point that he outsnaps him when he's on the field with Ebron, and the Colts clearly love him. And I know Andrew Luck loves him, but Jack Doyle has the same issues that Eric Ebron has, which there are a lot of mouths to feed, but it is a very high volume offense. Yep. But the vast difference is the price. Right. Jack Doyle is going as tight end 17, whereas Eric Ebron's going as tight end 7. So if you are going to take a share of the tight ends in Indianapolis, I would go with the cheaper version and Jack Doyle.
Agree 100%, guys. To me, it's just a no-brainer. If they're both healthy, I like Doyle more anyways. Right. And then the fact you can draft him basically for free is, it's nonsense.
Yeah, but see, that's what I mean. And all kidding aside, that point at the tight end, that's pretty nice value. Trey Burton, Jimmy Graham, Jack Doyle, Jordan Reed, all kidding aside, man, that's, wait on your tight ends, wait on your quarterbacks. You got guys like that going pretty much for free in the 13th, 14th.
He's going to finish as a tight end 1 this season. If he stays healthy all 16 games, it's a no-brainer. And the fact that he's going tight end 17 for free at the end of drafts is ridiculous.
Yeah, target that all day.
Exactly. All right, let's dive into the very top-heavy wide receivers in this division, and we are going to start off with two of the best, and then we are going to jump off a cliff for the rest of the wide receivers in this division as far as it comes to fantasy relevance and production. First up, we have DeAndre Hopkins, good old Nook, who is wide receiver 1 overall, going 6th overall in drafts, in front of Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas. His Foresight projection is WR3 overall, surprisingly, and his total Foresight rank is WR4. Now, let's go over fantasy finishes real quick. His rookie season, he was WR51, then he jumped up to WR14, then he finished WR4, back to WR26, and then the last 2 years, WR2 and WR1. Last season, he played in all 16 games. As I mentioned, he was WR1 overall in total points. The wide receiver position, he was WR3 in points per game. Let's dive in a little bit more. He was WR5 with 163 targets, WR2 with 125 receptions, and WR2 with over 1,500 receiving yards, and WR4 with 11 touchdowns. Elite fantasy production.
Yeah, and his next-gen stats, the only stat that really jumps out to you is the fact that he was wide receiver 2 in his team's percentage of average targeted air yards with 44%. That is just ridiculous. He is as elite as it comes. You know, a few days ago, people were all up in arms on the fact that he was on the PUP list. He was on the PUP list for one day, and then they activated him, and then you've already seen highlights of him at practice breaking people down. So DeAndre Hopkins is 100% fine. You can lock him up as one of, if not the top wide receiver in PPR in redraft in 2019.
And guys, Hopkins, what can you say as far as consistency goes? Really only behind AB and Devontae Adams across the board. You see him in the top 6, did that 4 times, WR5. Top 12 weeks, did that 7 times, WR4. Top 24 weeks, 11 times, WR3. And then overall, the third most consistent wide receiver in all of fantasy football. And he was pretty awesome for you in the fantasy playoffs, too. In week 14, WR24, week 15, WR1, and then week 16, WR12. Not a whole lot you can even say about this guy. He's incredible. You do expect if Fuller and Kuti can be healthy this season, he might not get that ridiculous 44% of his team's intended air yards, but I mean, he's still going to put up elite numbers. You have to just love this guy.
And that's the crazy thing, Steve. First of all, who had more than 44% of their team's targeted air yards? I got to look that up. That's unbelievable that somebody topped that. Second of all, it's almost more ridiculous that could be a safe level. I mean, who's going to steal? Fuller and Kuti can't stay healthy. Who is stealing targets? They have nobody at tight end. He's going to see that volume again.
And that's what he's doing when opposing defenses also knows that he's the only viable pass catcher. So let Fuller and Kuti be consistently available and then see what DeAndre Hopkins is going to do.
Right, yeah, exactly. Unbelievable.
Yeah, guys, it's crazy. It's like playing Madden, and you're just like, I'm going to throw it to Hopkins every play, and you can't stop it. You literally just can't stop it.
Yeah, no, he's awesome, man. He is.
Everybody knows where it's going. It doesn't matter.
Every single season, until further notice, he has the opportunity to be the overall PPR wide receiver 1.
Yep.
Moving on to the next highest drafted wide receiver in this division, Indianapolis Colts wide receiver T.Y. Hilton. He's currently going as wide receiver 12 at the top of the 3rd round, behind Keenan Allen, behind Adam Thielen, in front of Amari Cooper and AJ Green. That's probably going to change, and we'll get into that in just a second. He clocks in his Foresight's aggregate projected wide receiver 12, and he is total Foresight's wide receiver 13 overall. So between the ADP, the projection, and the Foresight rank, you see very nice alignment. So everybody's dialed in onto this guy. He's got one of the best average strength of schedule rankings at the wide receiver position this season, coming in at wide receiver 5 there. You know, the last several years, he's been either a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. Last season, wide receiver 14. Before that, wide receiver 27, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 22, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 18, and wide receiver 31. This is a consistent guy that you can count on to give you a full season's worth of fantasy production. He is going to miss a game or 2 here and there, as he did last season. He only played 14 out of 16 games, but was still able to be wide receiver 13 in points per game and wide receiver 14 overall. He had 120 targets, 76 receptions, 1,270 receiving yards. Those were all wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 rankings at those positions. 16 16.7 elite yards per reception numbers, and he was wide receiver 20 with 6 touchdowns. I mean, this guy is an outstanding, consistent producer, and I know he had some decent next-gen stats as well.
Yeah, the one that really jumps off the page at you, Ben, is the fact that his yards after completion per reception was good enough for wide receiver 12. So a guy who can break tackles, shed players, and make big plays, and that's what he's been for Andrew Luck. And the only season outside of his rookie year where he finished outside of being a WR1 or WR2 was the year in which Captain Luck missed the entire season. So outside of that, he has been a consistent and reliable back-end wide receiver 1 and high-end wide receiver 2. And that's what he's going this season. You're just being asked to pay a little bit of a premium for him being the elite wide receiver in an elite offense on a very loaded team on paper. And he's going as WR12 overall, but it's still a very fair price for a guy who is super consistent.
Yeah, you know what, fellas? When I was looking at the consistency numbers for all these wide receivers, I was actually a little surprised that T.Y. came in as consistent as he did, just because I always kind of thought of him as more of like your boom bust kind of guy. He'll give you 180 one week and 20 another week. But when it came to last season, top 6 weeks, and keep in mind he missed 2 games, so that's 2 opportunities he couldn't pad these numbers. Top 6 weeks, he did that twice, WR13. Top 12 weeks, did that 3 times, WR20. But then when you look at him being in top 24, so WR2 or better, he did that 8 times, and that's WR11 overall.
Yeah.
And then as far as his overall consistency metric, average weekly ranking, he clocked in at WR9 and had a great fantasy playoff run too, where he was WR4, WR20, and WR10. So in that offense next year, there is a lot to love about the guy, but like you said, Jay, you are paying a little bit of a premium there for him.
Yeah, but again, as the 9th most consistent wide receiver, a guy who finished WR14 last year and WR13 in points per game, we have him ranked as WR13 in total foresight. He's just being drafted slightly ahead of that, but you're not overpaying by an egregious amount, so I have no problem where he's going in drafts currently.
Yeah, the only other thing I can say about T.Y. is, his playoff finishes. You love seeing a guy that finished strong down the stretch as wide receiver 4, wide receiver 20, and wide receiver 10 when it matters the most, and you don't have any reason to think it's going to be any different this season. So
let's jump off the cliff. All right, guys, we talked about the 2 elite wide receivers. Now we're going to go from round 3 to round 7 and WR33 overall with Will Fuller out of the Houston Texans. He is being selected behind Allen Robinson and Christian Kirk and in front of Sammy Watkins and Sterling Shepard. His aggregate projection for 2019 is WR34, right in line with where he's being selected. Total Foresight has his health risk baked in. He is currently ranked in Total Foresight as WR50. He does have a back third savage ranking for the wide receiver as WR20. Now let's go to his career finishes. This guy is currently being selected as WR33 in the back end of the 7th round. His career finishes WR65, WR61, WR69. That is consistently bad. Last season, he appeared in 7 games. He was WR20 in points per game, which is why he continues to get this favoritism towards his ranking, and people want to ignore his continued health risk. His next-gen stats do jump off the page a little bit at you. He was WR12 in average separation, and he was WR12 in average targeted air yards with 14.6. But he's just a guy who cannot stay healthy and make it through 16 games for you.
Let's just describe the experience of drafting Will Fuller in the back end of the 7th round, and you tell me if that's an appropriate area of your draft to take a guy like this. You are going to draft Will Fuller, and on the weeks that he is definitely going to play and not hampered enough by injury that you're concerned about how limited he's going to be, he is going to probably give you some nice wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type numbers, maybe 40 to 50% of the time. The rest of the time, he's going to be a wasted spot on your roster that you are going to be tempted to drop. So I would rather not draft Will Fuller, and I would rather wait until somebody gets frustrated with him not being available and drops him and get him for free as a free agent.
Let's just call it what it is. He is a best ball stud. In best ball, he's probably priceless, but in season-long redraft dynasty whatever, he's never finished better than WR61 so far in 3 seasons. So, Steve, anything to add before I move on to somebody who actually brings some interest to me?
No, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're talking about a guy whose NFL career has gone 14 games, 10 games, 7 games, and that's a trend in the wrong direction, if you ask me. And he's coming off an ACL too, so it's just, to me, it's a wasted draft pick and redraft, especially a 7th rounder. That's someone who's supposed to be in your starting lineup all season.
Enough said. Yep. Let's move on to somebody much more interesting, and that's Corey Davis, who is going as WR39 in drafts behind Geronimo Allison, Marvin Jones, and in front of Dede Westbrook, a guy we'll get to next, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's going behind guys that aren't even the primary weapon on their offenses. His aggregate projection is WR42, so in line with where he's being drafted. His total Foresight rank, however, is WR35. Last season, he played in all 16 games and finished in as WR28. He was WR19 in targets, WR29 in receptions, and WR21 in receiving yards. Again, he's going as WR39. He was WR6 in his percentage of team-targeted air yards with 36%. He saw the 6th highest percentage of targeted air yards last season and put up WR28 numbers. Can that possibly improve? Is he consistent whatsoever? It's just shocking to me that a guy who's the primary weapon on his offense can be had at a WR39 price tag in drafts.
I think that everything is always relative to the price, and I think at his price, he is a nice value. And you have to remember, this was a completely anemic offense, and after Delaney Walker went down, he was the only relevant pass catcher. That is not the case anymore. Assuming A.J. Brown is okay from the little slip that you saw on social media or wherever the other day, then they've got A.J. Brown and Adam Humphries, Delaney Walker hopefully back, an increased confidence and reliance on Derrick Henry. You still have Dion Lewis there. So I think that Corey Davis should be freed up to do a little bit more, and I hope that Marcus Mariota can take a step and be a little bit more effective. And, regardless, that is a very low risk point of your draft. Yeah. So I don't have a problem if you go there at all. But me personally, I like a little bit more upside, but you're talking about the 9th round at wide receiver 39. So beggars can't be choosers.
And then, guys, I just want to point out really quick, last year, and it kind of speaks to the kind of season Davis had, right? He had 3 top 6 finishes, which actually he was WR8 in all fantasy football when it came to that. But the 32nd overall most consistent wide receiver. So you just had major peaks and valleys with this guy. And I think, and you said it, Ben, I think the biggest thing is going to be Mariota's health and development. If he can be healthy, the elbow's okay, I think, Davis could definitely return some value. He is going to be the guy. And like you said, it's the 9th round, so you could do worse.
I'm with you guys. I think his volume could be safe, even though they added some weapons. I think those weapons could help take some attention off of him and free him up to be a little bit more successful. So a WR39 price tag seems like it's pretty reasonable to me.
However, when you move on to a wide receiver that's going after him that's even cheaper, Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Dede Westbrook is going as wide receiver 40 in the 9th round as well, right behind Corey Davis and Marvin Jones, right in front of MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Cortland Sutton. He is Foresight's aggregate projected wide receiver 38, and he clocks in as total Foresight's wide receiver 36 overall. He has got one of the lower end Savage strength of schedule rankings in the NFL, 29th out of 32. He took a big step last year with awful offensive play all around, awful quarterback play all around. His rookie season, he was wide receiver 90. Last year, he played all 16 games and was wide receiver 33. He was wide receiver 45 in points per game. But again, that was with Blake Bortles. He's gone. They brought in Nick Foles. He had 101 targets, 66 receptions, 717 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 10.9 yards per reception. I think that Dede Westbrook is a very sneaky, nice play this season. I am not here to say that Nick Foles is going to be some elite guy, but Nick Foles is a very steady Eddie, 16th to 20th ranked type of quarterback kind of guy, which is a vast improvement over the quarterback play that you got last season. So when you're just talking about average, middle of the road, efficient type of quarterback play, Dede Westbrook is going to feast. And at a wide receiver 40 price tag, I'll take Dede Westbrook over Corey Davis all day.
Hey, Super Bowl MVP, old Big Nick is coming to town. And with Dede Westbrook, who had an average separation that was good enough for WR5 last season, and a surprising yard after catch per reception that put him at WR23, he is a playmaker. And with some more talent coming at the quarterback position, this could be a year for him to take another step forward. And like you said, a guy who is going WR40 in drafts and is WR35 in total Foresight, there is value there. Late in drafts, value.
Yeah, absolutely, fellas. And Ben, you talked about, Blake Bortles. barrels. In this offense last year, Dede still managed to be WR25 overall in consistency. He didn't have monster weeks that were jumping off the page, but, he was somebody you could put in that WR3 spot on your starting lineup and just roll with him. And I think this year, the upside is certainly there. And, I mean, that's just a dirt cheap price to get a guy who's probably going to be the WR1 on his team.
He is one of my big-time breakout guys in 2019. Blake, it's all about the difference from, take the names out of it, exceptionally awful quarterback play to average professional type of middle-of-the-road quarterback play. So Dede did what he did last season with the former. Now that he's getting the latter, his upside is really, really going to flourish.
All right, guys, we jumped off a cliff going to the value there. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper now, getting into the double-digit rounds with our final three receivers. First up, we have Kiki Kuti, a guy who flashed last season. He is being selected as WR45 early in the 10th round now, going behind N'Keal Harry and Golden Tate, which will change, and in front of DK Metcalf and Curtis Samuel. Foresight projection has him ranked as WR70. Listen, he played 6 games last season, and while he was WR100 overall after playing 6 games, he was a little bit better in points per game at WR48 with that average. Again, he's going WR45, which seems to be an appropriate price, all things considered. And I'm sure he's a fine player. He did flash, but again, he couldn't stay healthy. His metrics were not great when he was on the field, so I need to see more before investing. I know Houston is desperate for targets on that team, but I just don't have enough to go on at this point. I know it's late in drafts, but there are values around him.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't need to repeat anything you just said. I totally agree with you. I just think at that point, when you're looking at N'Keal Harry, Golden Tate, DK Metcalf, Curtis Samuel, the cheapest one on that list is also my favorite one on that list, and that's Curtis Samuel.
Outside of Golden Tate's suspension, the other 3 guys all have some appeal and some upside to me, and they're just a little bit more attractive than Kiki to me right now.
Yeah, fellas. I mean, for a guy that not only did he only play in 6 games, but he had to exit a couple of those games early as well. Yep. So I get the fact he had a monstrous 42 targets in that very limited sample size, and I think that's probably why people are reaching, because I consider it a reach for a guy that he's got to play. And there, like you said, there are other names around there. Like, give me Curtis Samuel all day long.
It's all about that Texans offense just being desperate for somebody else.
We like the guy. Hopefully he can stay healthy, and then maybe he can be a little bit more relevant. Moving on to another wide receiver in this division that we're much more excited about heading into 2019. Indianapolis Colts rookie wide receiver from The Ohio State University, Paris Campbell. He is currently going as wide receiver 52 at the back end of the 11th round behind Deshaun Jackson, Dante Moncrief, and in front of Anthony Miller and Devin Funchess. Man, that is a really nice value, late round value point at the wide receiver position in your draft. He is currently Foresight's aggregate projected wide receiver 61, and he clocks in at Total Foresight's wide receiver 60 overall, just going off of his aggregate projection combined with his savage strength of schedule metric. He does have one of the best savage strength of schedule rankings in the NFL at the wide receiver position, clocking in at 5th out of 32 there. And when you look at some of the notes from Dane Brugler's draft guide, he lists his strengths as twitchy feet and moves differently than the other athletes on the field, instant acceleration and outstanding long speed, improved focus and consistency finishing catches in 2018, posting an 82% catch rate, 90 catches on 110 targets. Urban Meyer was quoted as saying, he's an elite person, an elite worker, end quote.
Yeah, look, I like Paris Campbell. Obviously, I live here in Columbus, Ohio. I got to see him, and he is a very similar player to one Curtis Samuel, but the problem is he is a great player on a team that is not devoid of ball catchers. They have plenty of mouths to feed, as we have mentioned, and it has been shown time and time again how difficult it is for a wide receiver to break into the NFL and have an instant fantasy impact. So, I think his price tag is very fair. He could present some upside value, but I think Total Foresight also has all of that baked into his ranking.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, and rookie wide receivers tend to come along really slowly. So don't be surprised if he's somebody in your league that you see floating around in free agency after somebody picks him up, starts him a couple of weeks, and is highly disappointed and drops him.
Yeah, and I did see recently it was reported that Chester Rogers was actually running in the slot receiver role with the ones in camp. So Paris Campbell is the type of guy for me who I think is going to come on as the season goes on, unless Chester Rogers is blowing it out of the water.
Nope.
But exactly. So he's somebody that I would probably wait on, especially when you've got guys like Pittsburgh Steelers number 2 wide receiver Dante Moncrief going right in front of him, Anthony Miller, the number 2 wide receiver on the Chicago Bears, going right behind him, a red zone threat we're about to get into, Devin Funchess. So, there's just the other better options available even at that late point in your draft. And that takes us right into the last wide receiver of this division, Indianapolis Colts new addition, wide receiver Devin Funchess, going a couple spots behind Paris Campbell at wide receiver 54 at the top of the 12th round, right in front of yet another nice value, Tyrell Williams, and also Mecole Hardman. He is Foresight's aggregate projected wide receiver 60, clocks in at wide receiver 47 in our overall total Foresight ranking. So there is a little bit of recognized value there at that late 12th round point in your draft. Just 2 seasons ago, he finished as wide receiver 21. Last year in 14 games, it was a little bit of a different story. It was wide receiver 59 overall and wide receiver 62 in points per game, 79 targets, only 44 receptions, 549 yards. Obviously, we all agree that he's in a much better offensive situation going from the Carolina Panthers to the Indianapolis Colts. So, I think that at that point in the draft, it's all relative to price. That is a nice little upside dart throw for me. And I think some of the next gen stats support that as well.
Yeah, surprisingly, some of them do jump off the page, Ben. His average targeted air yards was good enough for WR29. And he was also WR31 in his team's percentage of targeted air yards, which was also surprising last season. Now, moving into Indy's offense, yes, there is some upside in this very flashy offense. He's going to be one of a number of receivers. He could certainly present some upside. Last season, he saw 25% target share. Like I said, good enough for WR31, but was only able to put up WR59 numbers with that volume, which he will not see this season.
Right. And you expect the efficiency to flip itself on its head. You expect the red zone targets to really spike. So, it's a completely different equation for him in Indianapolis in 2019 than it was in Carolina in 2018. And again, it always comes back to price. Wide receiver 54, top of the 12th round. There is a very, very nice upside there. There are guys that we love. I mean, think about it. The ADP wide receiver 53 through wide receiver 55, outstanding values. Anthony Miller, Devin Funchess, Tyrell Williams.
Yeah, Benny, I mean, you said it. For how late Funchess is going, and the fact he's going to now have Andrew Luck as his quarterback, not Cam Newton, and he gets a little bit of a fresh start too heading to Indy. I believe he's on a 1-year contract, so he's pretty much betting on himself this season. That price, you could totally pull the trigger on this guy, and don't be surprised if he gives you some weeks where he gets in the end zone twice. I mean, it just in that offense, that big body, it's definitely possible.
All right, guys, that wraps up another episode. Love it. We are now done with the AFC South. Another reminder, we're going to keep hammering this home. We are very excited about the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo on Sunday, August 18th from noon to 6 in Canton, Ohio. Come out, see the Fantasy Foresight team. We have got a litany of wonderful things planned for people that stop by the booth. Stop by, check it out. You won't be disappointed. It's going to be a great event. We are very excited about it. We will be giving away the final spot in the Fantasy Foresight Challenge at the Expo. That is your opportunity to take on the 6 members of the Fantasy Foresight team in a season-long PPR league. The winner of the league takes home $1,000. We don't think you can come into our home and take us down. This is your chance to prove it. All it takes is a small donation to Special Olympics to be entered. There are more details on our Twitter page. Go out, check it out. As we mentioned in our last episode, we are very excited about the new developments to fantasyforesight.com. Go check out the Total Foresight tab and the new offering of a Clipcast link for every player in our rankings. You can go out, listen to all of our thoughts, opinions, and stats about each player. Loving it.
Yeah, it's just one of the latest amazing development and enhancement at fantasyforesight.com. And next up, we have arguably the most exciting fantasy relevant division in all of the NFL. We have got the NFC South, and first up, it's going to be the quarterbacks and running backs. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.